Hello, I'm Sarah Besky from Brown University, and in my Antipode paper, I discuss an ongoing debate regarding the fair trade certification of plantation crops. On one side of this debate is Fair Trade USA, which in 2012 broke off from Fair Trade Labeling Organizations International, or FLO. FLO is a consortium of major fair trade organizations that governs the fair trade system and sets labeling and production standards. On the other side are retail companies such as Just Coffee, Intelligentsia, Counterculture, and the one I focus on in this paper, Equal Exchange. While Flow has certified tea, banana, and flower plantations since the 1990s, Fairtrade USA's recent breakoff stemmed from its desire to expand Fairtrade's reach to more plantations, specifically coffee plantations. Equal Exchange has never supported the idea of extending fair trade status to plantations. It has been Fairtrade USA's most vociferous opponent. Equal Exchange describes Fairtrade USA's move as a dilution of the fair trade ethos, enveloping corporate players like Nestle and Starbucks more deeply into fair trade and enabling them to market a higher percentage of their products as ethically produced. I analyze how Fairtrade USA and Equal Exchange have engaged one another in public forums, online, and in advertising. I argue that this debate is about who counts as the proper laboring subject of fair trade. Fairtrade USA and Equal Exchange each draw on their long-term engagements in the tea-growing regions of South Asia, particularly Darjeeling, in the Himalayan foothills of northeast India. Darjeeling tea plantations have been something of a testing ground for fair trade, as they were among the first in the world to receive fair trade certification. Nearly one-third of the region's 87 plantations are fair trade certified. Fairtrade USA has used the success of tea plantation certification to justify expansion onto coffee plantations. Equal Exchange insists that its fair trade model, which only operates on cooperatives and not plantations, best ensures justice. So there's an interesting kind of reversal here. Fair trade emerged through bottom-up partnerships between Latin American producers and Northern activists, but it was implemented in a largely top-down fashion in the Indian tea industry and in other industries outside of Latin America, from sugar to sports balls. Fair trade successes in Latin America provided what Nancy Fraser calls the framing for its agricultural justice model elsewhere, a mechanism for including and excluding particular kinds of laborers. In short, an ideal of justice rooted on Latin American coffee cooperatives was made modular and applicable to multiple agricultural contexts and to multiple kinds of injustices. Fair trade successes were exported from coffee to tea. Now they're being exported back again in a move to expand the reach of fair trade. In the paper, I draw on Fraser's notion of framing to trace how fair trade's global justice discourse, a discourse mediated and marketed by Northern organizations like Fairtrade USA and Equal Exchange, travels through and among sites. I ask what this discourse picks up and what it leaves aside. I base my critique on the premise that agricultural justice under global capitalism is a form of what Fraser calls abnormal justice. Under conditions of abnormal justice, claims about the distribution of resources and cultural recognition exist in tension with claims about what Fraser terms representation. Representation, she means the inclusion and exclusion from democratic communities. Even though a historically particular brand of Latin American peasant politics helped build the fair trade movement, both Equal Exchange and Fairtrade USA are now trying to make global justice claims on behalf of agricultural laborers across the world. This raises the empirical question of how actors make such claims. In the paper, I follow these Northern fair trade promoters as they frame the plantation debate. I argue that neither of these retailers have fully considered the ways in which workers themselves make claims on states, institutions, and one another. Nor have they considered how the very framework for justice that they put forth might foreclose such possibilities. Fair trade presents an alternative to capitalism as usual, but by avoiding the question of political representation, an entire suite of underlying forms of inequality that penetrate agricultural spaces, it continues to fail to coalesce into a radically transformative force. But we can glean something from these failures. The stalemate over what justice means and where, for whom, and how justice might be done contains within it a potential for an abnormal geography of justice, one that analyzes and intervenes at multiple scales. This kind of justice recognizes how the strategic value of distribution, recognition, and representation changes with context. An abnormal geography of justice does not require conceptual purity. It simply requires clarity about the histories and ongoing practices of subjugation that drive postcolonial agriculture. Thank you.